Welcome to this webinar, which is brought to you by the Society for Endocrinology and the Young Diabetologists and Endocrinologists Forum. My name is Isabel Huang-Doran. I'm an academic endocrinologist in Cambridge. And as someone who's recently completed my specialty training in diabetes and endocrinologist, I'm really delighted to be able to chair this session today. It's our annual endocrinology taster session. And the aim here is to really share with you why we think endocrinology is a fantastic specialty. We want to provide you with some tips and pointers and kind of insights into the training and interview process. And hopefully for anyone who's still undecided as to a specialty, we can try and persuade you to join us. Please note this is the first of two sessions, the second of which is tomorrow, and which will focus a little more on diabetes. So if you haven't already signed up, please do. We have three fantastic speakers lined up for you this evening, each of whom will speak for around 15 minutes. And then we'll have plenty of time afterwards for a question and answer session. Please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat throughout the next 45 minutes, or else there will be an opportunity during the Q&A to turn your mics on and ask some questions directly. However, in the meantime, please make sure your video and microphones are off whilst our talks are ongoing. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first session or our first speaker. So Dr. Shailesh Gohil is a consultant endocrinologist in Leicester and also training program director in the East Midlands Deanery. And this session is really going to be about getting into diabetes and endocrinology training. Dr. Gohil will provide some tips on navigating the application and interview process and some pointers on perhaps what the panel are really looking for. So Shailesh, over to you.
Thanks very much, Isabel, for that introduction. I'll just load up my slide. So yes, thanks very much, Isabel, for that introduction, and thanks for the to the Society for having me. So as Isabel said, I'm Shailesh Gohil. I'm a consultant endocrinologist working at University Hospitals of Leicester NHS Trust. I'm also co-training program director in the East Midlands, so I help supervise trainees and get them through their training. So I'm going to be helping or talking a little bit about how to navigate through the application and interview process. So I'll spend the next 15 minutes just talking a little bit about myself and then the process itself. So a little bit about me. I work in Leicester, but I was actually born and bred in Leicester, and I was born in one of the buildings just behind me. So in one sense, I've not gone very far, but I think I have in other sense, in other ways. I followed the kind of traditional training path. So I went to medical school in Nottingham, and then following medical school, I applied to foundation training like everyone else, and then went straight into core training. And around that time, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So in foundation training, I wanted to be a surgeon, and then decided actually surgery is not for me, and decided to go into core medical training, as it used to be called. Now it's called internal medicine training, or IMT. And even when I started my CMT years, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I went to a careers fair, actually, with the intention of meeting different specialties, and met one of my mentors, Dr. Miles Levy, and got talking to him, and was really inspired to then follow a career in endocrinology and diabetes. So my core training, I didn't actually have any rotations in D&E. So I took some team that then got me involved with some things like quality improvement projects, audits that I got involved with, and that really helped in my specialty applications and helped me get into endocrinology and diabetes training as a registrar. So I started my training in diabetes endocrinology, I think it was 2014 or 2015, and spent the first few years as a registrar. But I really wanted to do something a little bit different and something that other registrars at that time weren't really doing. So towards the end of my training, I decided to take a little bit of time out of program and do some research. So I spent some time in a lab, and I did some work looking at something called circulating tumor DNA in neuroendocrine tumors. And I'm currently writing up my MD thesis to develop skills which I may not necessarily have been able to do so if I just followed the traditional registrar kind of 5-year training scheme. Is currently 4 years because of the extended IMT. So I've CCT'd and I've been a consultant for nearly 2 years now, and I'm back in Leicester where I've started off. So I'm currently working as a consultant in Leicester, and I've got lots of hats. So other than my clinical job, as I said, I'm training program director. I'm still an honorary research fellow with the University of Leicester, continuing some of the work looking at circulating tumor DNA in endocrine tumors. Also involved in some national training schemes, for example, something called GE Notes, which I'm talking on at BES. So come and see my session if you'd like to learn more about GE Notes. So basically, the moral of the story is the world is your oyster. Within the world of endocrinology, again, there's lots of opportunities available for you to get involved with at every stage of your career, from foundation and core training all the way through becoming a registrar and consultant. So if you've got any more questions about kind of my training and what I've done, then feel free to ask questions in the chat or later on in the Q&A session. So for the remaining kind of 10 minutes or so, I'm going to go through top tips about the kind of the application process. So tips on what to do before applying, the application process itself, once you've submitted, and then the interview. And I'll go through kind of what the process is for those bits, because there'll be people who are in different stages of the career journey on this webinar. And then my last slide is just to go through some key dates, which you might be interested in. So I think preparation is really key. Whereas there's probably others who aren't still quite sure what career you want to go into. But regardless, I think there's still some preparation that you can do wherever you are in your kind of decision about what you want to do. I think it's pretty standard, lots of the questions that are asked in both the application form and in the interview, things like teaching experience, quality improvement and audits, whether you presented any posters, whether you got any publications, what courses you've been on. So I think it's worth, wherever you are in your career, to think about these little bits that you can do extra that might help support your application in whatever specialty that you want to do. Now, obviously, for a career in diabetes and endocrinology, if you have got an audit in D&E, or if you've got a poster in D&E, that will put you in better stead in your application and in your interview. But it doesn't necessarily have to be there. And your internal medicine training rotations can be random and would be varied. So we're looking for someone who is also very well-rounded and not just kind of pigeonholed in one place. Part of that preparation is thinking about where you want to work. Some people are quite keen on wanting to work in one place because of family circumstances or because you're invested in that area. And I think even if you're not, I think it's very well worth speaking to the training program director in the region, not only because they might be able to get you involved with clinical work, but also they might be able to get you involved with things like audit or research, or presenting a poster somewhere, which will support your application when the applications do open. I think finding out about vacancies is really important, because if the place where you want to work doesn't have any vacancies for that, or submitting an application till the next round, for example, or if you know there's no vacancies in the area that you want to work at that point, then it may be worth looking around and seeing where else you think you might want to work. I'll talk more about places to work afterwards, once the interview, after the interview slide. But I think wherever you are, I think it's worth speaking to your training program director to see what you can get involved with locally. And then know the key dates, because if you don't know when the applications are opening, then it's very hard for you to plan plan your application when the round does open. So a good place to look for all of this information is on the Health Education England medical specialty recruitment website. So if you just Google this, you'll be able to find it relatively easily, and it's got basically a guide to specialty applications, and it's got a specific section on endocrinology and diabetes that you'll be able to find information on. So this is a really good resource if you've not been on this website before, just to help navigate you through the whole application process. So the application itself, so it's done on a system which is online, and the website is called Oriel. And on the previous slide, I said know the dates, because it's quite important that you take your time with the application. It's quite a lengthy form. It will ask you lots and lots of questions about lots of different things. It's lots of free text answers. And it's important to take your time when you're doing the application and show people your answers to get feedback. That being said, a lot of the medical specialties have got quite a standardized application form. So the gastroenterology application might be quite similar to the endocrinology application, which might be quite similar to the neurology application. The standards are quite set. You know, what audit experience do you have? What teaching do you experience do you have? What courses have you been on? Have you presented any posters? Have you got any publications? So what I do what I have done when I've applied for jobs is not done it straight on Oriel. I've copied and pasted the questions onto Word, for example, written my free text answers. That helps in two ways. One is the word count, because a lot of the questions will have a certain word count that you have to stick to. And also it gives you more flexibility because you're not worried about the website timing out or whatever. So write your answers, ask someone to have a look over to see what they think and provide feedback. Your application will be then scored, giving with points. And the higher level of achievement that you have, the more points you will be awarded. So, for example, if you presented a poster at a local meeting, for example, you might get a certain amount of points. But if you presented a poster at an international meeting, you're more likely to get more points for that. Similarly, with teaching, if you've done 1 or 2 teaching sessions with medical students on the ward ad hoc, you may not score as highly as someone who has set up their own teaching program and has delivered a certain amount of talks over a certain time. Some people will apply to more than one specialty, and there's a temptation to copy and paste the answers that you've done in one application to another one. I would try and discourage you from doing that, because it becomes quite clear when we're looking at the application forms whether actually your preferred specialty is something else and you've just applied to endocrinology and diabetes as a backup. And it's quite evident when some people have copied and pasted answers from one application to the other. Try and make your application more tailored towards the specialty you're applying to, especially endocrinology and diabetes. And if you're giving examples for different things that you've done, if you've got experience in audit in diabetes or a poster in diabetes and endocrinology, then it's better to put them as applications rather than other things. So we look through the application, read your applications and get the point about the stuff that you're trying to write about, because we don't have much time to look through your applications when we're interviewing you. So it just makes things easier to navigate on your application form. And we'll be looking through lots of application forms in one day. So the easier you make it to read, the better. And talk to your references that you're putting on your application to know that they are your referees on your application form, because if they don't give you a reference in a timely fashion, then it's just harder for your kind of application to progress. So you press the submit button, and now it's time to relax, because you've done what you can. But actually now the hard work comes, because you need to start preparing for your interview, and your interview will be scored. You'll get more scores for your interview than you will in your application. So now's the time to start thinking about what questions you might be asked in your interview and preparing mock answers for what you might be asked. So the interview itself from the interviewer's side, so it's online and it's centrally led. So it's very unlikely that you are going to be interviewed by someone in your region or at your hospital or your training program director, because there's a pool of us who are interviewing on the same day, and we randomly allocated trainees. So it's very unlikely someone you know will be interviewing you. If there is someone you know who is interviewing you, usually that would have been flagged beforehand, and we often move people from one interview station to another so that someone who knows you isn't interviewing you. But if there is someone who knows you that's interviewing you, there's usually a lay representative present as well, to make sure things are equal and fair. And we're assessing you at the level of someone who is mid to late IMT3. So basically someone who's at the stage of training that typically is applying for a training job at that point. Now, we're aware that a lot of people will have more experience than others. You know, if you've taken time out of program, if you've not followed the traditional training route, if you've been doing trust grade jobs, for example. So we will take this into account when we are interviewing you. The questions that we ask you are standardized pretty much, and the scores are standardized. So we may be bombarding you with questions one after the other, which may not seem logical, but it's because we have to ask you these questions because we're told we have to ask you these questions and it will help us score you. So don't worry if we're kind of jumping from one topic to the other. There's a reason for that, and try not to be too fazed by that. And we have objective notes on which we are scoring you for, so that the scores aren't given randomly. We are given a guide on how to score you, and we'll be calibrated and benchmarking with each other to make sure that our scores are in line with what is expected. And there's a lay representative present throughout the day of interviews who will be dotting in and out of the interviews to make sure that the process is fair. So this is how the interview works on the day. So on the day of the interview, so obviously pre-interview, prepare, make sure you've got a quiet place to have your interview from, your camera and mic are working. Try not to do the interview from your phone if you can, just because the camera, the video size is quite small. So try doing it from a laptop, tablet, or a computer. Make sure you're settled, so camera is in a good position, and you're settled for the interview. So at the time of interview, you'll be let into the interview room. First, you'll have an ID check just to make sure that you're the person who we're supposed to be interviewing, and then you'll go through 2 stations. So both stations have a case, so you'll have some reading time. One station's got an endocrinology case, the other station's got a diabetes case. You can make some notes on a piece of paper, and then we'll go through. Then there's 10 minutes in each station to ask questions about medical SPR suitability and also suitability and commitment to training. So in station 2, that suitability and commitment to training, there'll be 3 minutes for you to give a presentation about why you've applied to diabetes and endocrinology and why you would make a good trainee in diabetes and endocrinology. So be prepared for those 3 minutes where you're expected to talk about yourself and why you're good for the specialty. And then throughout the stations, we'll be also marking you on your communication skills. So you've done the interview. Now is the real time for you to relax. You've done what you can to try and get into the specialty that you want to do, so diabetes and endocrinology. And in the background now, what the team will be doing is scoring your applications and working out what score you've got, so that then you can be allocated a job, ideally in the place on the applications. Will get first preference to work at the place where they want to, and then other people will get ranked lower, will get placed in other places. Obviously, people will accept and decline offers. Those who have declined offer in a certain place, then other people will get a chance to upgrade their position to a place where they ideally want to work. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking through this slide. So it's just mainly to let you know that there's 2 rounds that happen each year. So one is around an August 2020 start, and one is around February start. And the applications open around November or July, respectively, for each round. Traditionally, there used to be more training numbers available in August, because that's kind of the traditional training time or changeover dates. However, more recently, we have numbers both in August and February. So feel free to apply when it's right for you. And for these dates, there's the website at the bottom if you are interested in looking for the dates, because they may change. So that's a little bit about me and navigating through the application process. I'm sorry that was a little bit over 15 minutes, but I'll welcome questions right at the end during our Q&A session.
Thanks so much, Shailesh. So as he said, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. But for now, we're going to move straight on to our next speaker. We're going to step into an endocrinologist's shoes for the day and find out a little bit more about what the job of an endocrinologist actually looks like. Our speaker is Dr. Aisha Saqib. So Aisha is a consultant in diabetes endocrinology and general medicine at Guy's and St Thomas's in London. She trained in South Thames Deanery, and as part of that was the Royal College Chief Registrar for a year at Medway. So I suspect you'll be telling us a little bit about that as well. Aisha, over to you. Thanks so much.
Welcome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Isabel, for the introduction. And thank you, Society of Endocrinology, for inviting me today. And thank you, YDEF, who I was affiliated with for many years, for inviting me to do this talk for all the trainees today. So I will be talking about exploring career pathways and what does a day in the life of an endocrinologist look like. And I will be talking about my experiences as a trainee. I hope you find it all useful. And of course, you can post questions in the chat box, or you can wait to ask me till the end when we have a group discussion going on. So I was trained abroad in Pakistan. So all of you who are international medical graduates here, feel free to relate to me. I applied for the UK Foundation program when I moved to the UK straight away, and I got into foundation training in South Thames Foundation School. I did the old-fashioned core medical training for 2 years, and then I got my higher specialist training number in DNE in South London, where I did my higher specialist training. But during the training, I was like, I really need to get my head around NHS and how the wider systems and processes work. So I took a year out of training to do the RCP Chief Registrar role, which I will talk about briefly towards the end of the presentation. So throughout the training, as you would realize, you will move through a lot of hospitals. You get to work with so many different colleagues. You see thousands of different types of patients, and you come across some amazing supervisors. And obviously during the process, if you're internationally trained, you will have to do some extra exams. Whereas if you're being trained locally, you will have to do the usual MRCP Part 1, Part 2 phases, and then your subspecialty exam when you're a higher specialist trainee. So you do interviews at CMT stage or IMT now, and then you also have another interview at the time of applying for your higher specialist training, which Salish slightly pointed towards as well in his talk. And then my other interview was for the RCP Chief Registrar role, and another interview was for the consultant job. So it's a competitive process throughout, but the rewards are very fruitful. It shouldn't stop you from thinking about your personal life. I've had 2 children during my training, and some maternity leave as well. So it took me a total of 11 years to go through this journey from 2011 till now. So newly appointed as a consultant here at Guy's and St Thomas's. So I wanted to ask you all, why would you want to do endocrinology? Think hard now, because this is such an interesting specialty. What are your career aspirations? Do you want to do general medicine do you want to do general medicine with your higher specialist training? What are your personal attributes? Are you curious? Do you like to look after complex and rare medical conditions? Do you like to work in an MDT? Are you a problem solver? There is a lot of overlap between physics, cell biology, biochemistry, genetics is also up and coming, and obviously the whole emphasis is to improve clinical practice and what we provide as care to our patients. And then where is your end goal? Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? Because what you should never look at is how your training is going to be. You should look at where you're going to end up, because that is actually when your career really starts as a consultant. So just think of all of this when you're applying for a job. Obviously, the specialty has no procedures, which was a big plus for me. I hate blood and I hate body fluids. So I thought, perfect, let's go for endocrinology. So going on as a junior doctor within DNE, it's great fun. The learning curve is super steep because the specialty is really unexplored in foundation or core medical training stage. My only DNE job was as an F1 for 4 months in a district general hospital. After that, I was not exposed to specialist diabetes or endocrine at all till I started my higher specialist training. You will feel like people will call you to answer the weirdest and the most wonderful queries. You will feel you're the smartest of the lot, followed very closely by rheumatologist, I would say. It is paired with GIM, so you do general internal medicine as part of your training, but with the new shape of training and introduction of IMTs and higher specialist training being reduced to 4 years from 5 years, most of the specialties are now associated with GIM. So that's nothing new. It has been great fun. You learn so much as a medical registrar, and I think it makes you a more rounded doctor. Within your training years, there's so much to explore. Like Salish said earlier, the world is your oyster. You can do so much. Obviously, there are opportunities to work less than full time to those of you who are mothers or are carers for others. You can explore the non-training pathways as well, though I would recommend going into the training going into the training because that's a more smooth pathway. You need less paperwork as compared to when you go for the Caesar route. And within DNE, you can choose if you want to have a subspecialty interest, because it's such a vast field and people do really admire if you have a subspecialist skill or something you would like to develop further when you are newly appointed as a consultant in diabetes and endocrine. You can go into academic pathways. A lot of my colleagues and historically DNA could never be done without a PhD or an MD. So you can explore the academic pathways. And then my personal interest was quality improvement. And I had a lot of interest in pathways and processes and how things work and how can we make things more lean and how can we more efficiently use our current and existing resources. So my interests were pathways and processes and quality improvement. And obviously there are some people who take time out to do a degree in medical education or spend a time or a year out of training to explore this further. So it all depends on your interest and you can explore this because the specialty is really flexible. The TPDs really encourage this nationally. So just going forward, what I did was I took a year out of training after ST5 to do the RCP Chief Registrar role. This was initiated by the Royal College of Physicians in 2016. It's a 1-year-long post, and you get basically dedicated time to do management work. So it's either a 40-60 split or a 50-50 split, which was mine. You're based in an NHS trust, so you have a ground where you're working from. You have to be minimum of ST4 plus, so slightly geared towards higher specialist trainees. And then you can opt not to do any general medicine, or you can do some. Because I wanted to keep my wide skill set, I opted to do general medicine along with my chief registrar role. And the role can be carried out of program or within program. I had to do an out of program role because I live in Kent, so I wanted to do the chief registrar role in Kent rather than in South London, where I was appointed as a trainee. So, and then you get leadership and coaching from the Royal College of Physicians. They have an excellent faculty, and then you get support from your local mentor, who is usually very senior, like a medical director or clinical director. So what did the role help me with? So when you are appointed as a chief registrar, which has now become a really competitive process, again, you have to interview for it. 3 or 4, sometimes up to 6 people apply for one post in the same hospital. And when you do it, obviously, first 2 or 3 days are your clinical days. You can negotiate which day of the week you want to be your clinical. In that, you do your clinics, you do your admin from those clinics, you do your general medical on-calls, and if you're on a ward, you do your ward rounds. And obviously, because you're still a trainee, you have to maintain a portfolio. You have to demonstrate that you're doing some workplace-based assessments, and you will be part of the annual ARCP process. So just don't forget about your e-portfolio. It's still part and parcel of the role. And on my non-clinical days, when I was purely working with the management team in the hospital, there used to be so many meetings. And for the first 3 months, I was absolutely overwhelmed with the number of meetings. And then I realized actually to get some work done, I had to prioritize which meeting I need to go to and which meeting someone else can go to and let me know what has happened there and summarize the minutes for me. So that was, I think, a really, really good key learning point for me as a registrar, because when I became a consultant, the transition felt a lot smoother. I knew what I was talking about. I could deal with the mid-level, the high-level managers. I also worked with NHS Improvement and NHS England, so I knew the bigger NHS infrastructure, how things work, how to get things done in the NHS. I collaborated with a lot of people to deliver some quality improvement project work and some service development projects as well. And again, when you are working on such a large scale with so many different variety of people, you learn how to project manage your time, how to project manage the people, and these are the skills which crucial to work as a consultant. So I will just tell you now about my consultant job plan. So this is my job plan. It looks very busy because I'm a newly appointed consultant, and when that happens, you get given a lot of work, which is not bad. Then you can slowly and gradually over the years modify your job plan. Right now, I'm interested in doing a lot of things. So I said yes, yes, yes to everything, as usual. So on Monday, I do a young adult diabetes clinic, which is my most favorite day of the week. I see people from age 18 to 25 who have been diagnosed with diabetes of different types, and we manage them with an MDT, and we try and improve their outcomes, delay the onset of development of complications, and we have had really excellent outcomes. Our clinic at Gardens and Slums is one of the most popular ones in London, and people want to be referred to it to be seen by our specialist teams. On Tuesday, which is today, I had a very busy morning. I did an endocrine MDT with my other consultant colleagues and consultant radiologist, and I just finished my endocrine clinic, and I will let you know about some patients I've just seen today. Wednesday, again, another very interesting day for me. I do a diabetes rapid access clinic where I'm referred all the newly diagnosed diabetes patients or all patients who presented to A&E and were sent home because they did not need admission. On Thursday, I go in the community to do a foot MDT clinic where I work with a very specialized team of podiatrists, vascular surgeons, and see very complex medical patients actually. And on Friday, I do another endocrine clinic. Our GIM commitment at my hospital, we just do 2 months per year, and we do an acute week of on-calls, which is 4 weeks per year. I should have written weeks here and months, but it's not too much, and you can negotiate with this, but I love doing all of this, so I haven't negotiated out of any of this. I'm also the lead for perioperative diabetes management because this is an area of interest to me and I want to sort it out basically for the trust. I'm an education supervisor to F1s, IMTs, and GPVDSs, and I love to supervise trainees to deliver successful quality improvement work. And I do it for a lot of GIM trainees undifferentiated who are like you and want to do DNE. And this is something I really enjoy doing. It's so rewarding. So today, just going to go forward. So today, what happened? I was in the adrenal MDM this morning. I had this 26-year-old, and I want you to write your answers in the chat box because I will look at it later and I want to see who gets it right. So I had this really interesting 26-year-old lady. She was referred to us from the neurofibromatosis team. They found a large 8-centimeter mass. Can someone write in the chat box which gland are we talking about? It's just a little quiz. I want to see who is the most keen and who has done some reading about endocrinology. And then I had a clinic in the afternoon. I'm not going to write about all the 8 patients I saw, but some of the mixture of patients. I had a 26-year-old who had come in for Addison's follow-up, which is very simple. You just make sure they're taking their hydrocortisone and fludrocortisone. I had a 41-year-old who had a microprolactinoma. So she's just on cabergoline and we are managing her. She's trying to conceive. We have given her a plan. I have a 36-year-old male patient with hypogonadism secondary to total bilateral orchidectomy in 2010. So again, long-term patient, but we are looking after him as well. I had a 46-year-old who had a renalectomy for pheochromocytoma 3 months ago. We looked at her biochemistry and we looked at her histopathology and we went through all the management plan with her. I had a very interesting 18-year-old patient with premature ovarian insufficiency, and I think she has ovarian dysgenesis. But we will do some karyotyping and some DNA testing to see what's going on. And then we are also following up a 21-year-old with congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So really interesting patients, and you get to learn their life stories and you get to know so much more about them. It's so rewarding. And as a consultant, you get to see the same patient year on year and you build a relationship. And every time the next consultation is better than your last one. And I think you can make a meaningful difference. We have patients who travel from all over Kent, sometimes from North London as well, sometimes from Hertfordshire, just to come and see us, which is amazing. So have some people written some answers for which gland this is? I shall have a look at the chat later because I do want to see who is really interested in endocrinology. Fabulous. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about today was MDT working. So I thought I will just take a snapshot of who was in our MDT this morning. So we have loads of endocrinologists. Obviously, not everyone was sitting there today. There's few floating in, floating out, and today was a consultant strike as well. So a lot of people were not at work. We work with the oncologists. We work with the endocrine surgeons who do our adrenalectomies and parathyroidectomies. Obviously, pituitary is quite next to the skull base. So we have some ENT surgeons in our clinics as well. And obviously, when we have the neuroendocrine tumor MDT, they are the front key players because we refer all our carotid body tumors and PGLs to them. We work very closely with the hepatobiliary team. The radiologists basically are the key features of our MDT. They review all of our adrenal and pituitary imaging and our neuroendocrine tumor imaging as well, which is usually in the form of a full body MRI scan. We work very closely with our nuclear medicine department, who review all the uptake scans with us. We work with the clinical geneticist, the histopathologist, and obviously the biochemistry team, which we heavily rely on. So that's my talk. If you have any questions or anything you want to ask, please feel free to drop a question in the chat.
Aisha, thanks so much. That was really fantastic. Look forward to some questions later. Next up, we have Dr. Jalini Joharatnam. Jalini is a consultant endocrinologist at the Lister Hospital in Stevenage. She's also an undergraduate specialty tutor at the University of Cambridge and an RCP tutor. And she's going to explore with us some of the other aspects and kind of extra roles that might be involved in a consultant position in endocrinology. So without further ado, Jalini, thanks very much.
Hello. I just wanted to check if you can see my slides.
Yes, we can see them, but they're not in presenter mode.
Okay, just going to see if I can adjust that. Okay, is that in presenter mode?
No.
No.
Sorry, as in it is in presenter mode, yes.
Yes.
So we can see all the slides down the edge.
Right, okay. Thank you. So my name is Jalini Joharatnam. I'm one of the consultants at East and North Hearts. Thank you for asking me to speak today. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of how I've got to where I am, similarly to the other consultants who have spoken today. So I did my undergraduate training at University of Cambridge, and I became interested in diabetes and endocrinology during my SHO rotation at St George's, and started registrar training number in the Hammersmith rotation back in 2003. So we moved in Northwest London hospitals. I did do a PhD. I did one at Imperial with Dr. Stephen Franks, and the topic was on polycystic ovarian syndrome. After that, came back to finish registrar training at Hammersmith, and then had my first maternity leave. So all of my children came really after CCT. So one of the good things about diabetes and endocrinology is it's quite a family-friendly speciality. My first consultant post was locum consultant at Guy's and St Thomas's, and that was a part-time job as well, having just had a baby of 4 days a week, which worked really well. Then I had another baby, and I got a substantive post where I am at East and North Hearts in 2014. And actually, I have 3 children in total, so it's a good job for balancing home and family life. Although I did a PhD, I decided against continuing with research. I found it was really good doing a PhD to learn about reading and understanding papers. When I go to conferences now, I understand much better what's going on with translational medicine, and we've also published papers and chapters at the time. And you have some time away from the hustle bustle of the registrar rotation, so 3 or 4 years.
Jalini, sorry to interrupt. Can I just check, are we meant to be seeing slide 2? Because we're currently on slide 4.
Ah, sorry.
Sorry, guys. It seems to be stuck on 4.
Oh, sorry. Let me just end that and come back.
Yeah.
Is that any better?
Yeah, so I think you're on 3 now. I think that's roughly.
Roughly, oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so The title that I got actually was I'm a consultant in diabetes and endocrinology, now what? So I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about what I find interesting about the job. I think it is a great career, rewarding and attractive, because often we see a lot of young people and there are cures available to them, whether that be diabetes or thyroid illness or problems with the adrenal gland. There are treatments available, and sometimes you get into a speciality where you have a lot of chronic disease. I mean, diabetics, they have a chronic disease, but they don't have as good a treatment available. So that was really attractive to me. You know, you may have much happier patients. So I was given the advice when I was sort of at your level of trying to think about what's the worst bit about your speciality and seeing if you can live with that and whether you think you can manage that in your specialty. And within our specialty, that could be something like diabetic feet or recurrent diabetic ketoacidosis patients, or some people, you know, don't really like general medicine on calls. I mean, I do, but you have to think about what you think is the worst bit of specialty and think, well, could I live with that? You know. So for me, like the other consultants that have spoken, I find that all those things you can spin them around and make them very interesting to you. And the on-calls in my hospital during the week are only once in the month during the week and 4 or 5 times on the weekend. So it's not too bad. The first few years when we get our consultant jobs, we're often finding our feet. So we may have our 10 PA job plan and we sort of stick to that and make sure that we understand how to do things. A lot of it is looking after patients and making sure the clinical side of things we're happy with. But then later on, we might develop specialist interests or apply to a job. So when we apply to a job, they may have a specialist interest already there, such as a pump clinic or antenatal clinic. I do diabetes and endocrinology, but a lot of my colleagues choose one or the other. And when you're applying for a job, I'd say don't be put off if there is a very specialist interest in there, because once you get the job, say you want to apply for that job because it's in the area you really want to work, there's nothing to say that you can't change your job plan slightly later. I've changed my job plan quite a few times during the last sort of 8 or 9 years that I've been working here. Usually the clinical director will shape the department and decide what needs to be covered. And you will have regular meetings with your clinical director, either at appraisals or just informally to say, look, these are my interests. This is how I'd like my job to develop. And that's how things change. So don't feel that you're stuck once you get into a job. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. I hope you can see this. In my job, don't forget that there are lots of other interesting things that you can apply to do. So apart from the base diabetes and endocrinology job, you can get involved with postgraduate medicine or undergraduate medicine. I do both, but some people choose one and become very specialized in that area. So I'm one of the RCP tutors at the Trust. That means I work a lot with the IMT trainees, how their program works, interview and appoint the RCP junior doctor representatives. So I find, you know, that's another rewarding thing to do. I'm also an educational supervisor to 3 foundation trainees, clinical supervisor to GP trainees, and with my undergraduate hat on, I'm Year 4 undergraduate lead for Cambridge medical students. So you don't have to choose at this stage. You can try both, getting involved with undergraduates, getting involved with postgraduates, and then later on you might decide you want to do one more than the other. And don't forget, we're always growing and developing ourselves. So I've been a consultant now for 12 years, and this year I'm starting a postgraduate certificate of medical education. So there's nothing to say that, oh, it had to have been done at the beginning and I can't develop myself or progress. in Hertfordshire, we're getting a university, a medical school in the next 5 years. So I need to now think ahead about, if I want to be involved in there, how will I develop myself? So if you do something like a postgraduate certificate in medical education, perhaps you can get more involved with universities later. So keep thinking, and you will grow in your career as well. We have appraisals once a year where you set goals and you can keep changing and adapting what you want to do. Within your job, a bit like the previous speaker had said, you will be doing lots of QI projects. Developing a business case is like a case for why you might need something. So we're developing at the moment a business case for a perioperative diabetes specialist nurse. I will also be doing posters with very keen IMTs who really want to do diabetes and endocrinology, and writing guidelines. Those are the additional parts of my job. And two of the colleagues at my trust are interested in medical legal work, and they attend conferences and develop themselves in that area. Two are keen on private practice, so they make time to do that, and some are interested in research. So it's a great field to, you're not just in your 10 PA job plan once you get your consultant job. So I'm going to stop there just to see if you have any questions.
Thanks very much, Jalini. Can everyone hear me okay? So if I can ask all three of our speakers now to turn their videos on, and I'm going to invite all of you in the audience now to ask some questions. You can either pop them in the chat, or else if you raise your hand, I can invite you to put your question directly to the speakers, whichever you prefer. Stunned silence. Perhaps I can ask each of the three of you then. You're going to hate me for this. Just to comment first. What's your, if you had to pick your favourite aspect of your jobs, what would that be? Perhaps we'll start with Shailesh.
Wow, that's a hard question, choosing one thing that's going to be the favourite part of my job.
The bit you look forward to most, perhaps.
So I like the variety of my job. So the other speakers have brilliantly showed, like, there's so much that you can do with the job in diabetes endocrinology. So, one day I might be doing clinic, another day I might be doing education supervision meeting, another day I might be doing an MDT meeting, another day I might be doing an antenatal clinic. There's so much variety in this job, and you can pick and choose eventually what you'd like to do. So I love coming into work. There's some specialists who come into work and then they're a bit grumpy, and I don't think they really do enjoy their work, but honestly, I love coming into work every day because of the variety and everything that I get to do.
Excellent. And Aisha, can I ask you the same question?
I enjoy the entity working the most. We work with the diabetes entity, the endocrine entity, with the GIM teams. I just love the variety. I get my energy from people. So that's how I'm not someone who likes to hide away in a dark room and look at slides or images. So I really enjoy that part of the job.
I have to say, I really liked your slide where you named the MDT and just showed us the breadth of that team. That was really special, actually.
And that just shows lifelong learning. When you're working with such intelligent people, you will always just learn and grow. And every MDT is such a great experience. You learn from others. You learn from the clinical geneticist. You know what's the latest thing on the block and what needs to be tested for. We have patients with FIOs who we are sending for repeat genetic testing because of the evolution in the field. So it's just so exciting and ever so evolving.
Absolutely. Fully agree with that. And Jalini, you have many hats. Which of those do you look forward to most?
I think it's still back to the original. Diabetes and endocrinology is very heavy with clinics. It's a very clinic specialty, like Aisha mentioned. It's not for procedures, particularly, or that sort of thing. So because I meet my patients again and again and again, I've been a consultant for 12 years. Some of them I've met, they know me really, really well. I know them really well as well. So there's nothing, you know, that they've seen me through all the children I've had. You know, they always ask how I am. You know, I know more about them than just their medical problems. So I do really always enjoy that.
Yeah, no, I agree. That continuity is really special. And even as registrars, you know, I remember seeing patients 3, 4, or 5 times over the course of my training, and that's really great, isn't it? Okay, so having warmed up, we have some questions in the chat coming hard and fast now. So I'm going to direct this one to Gohil. How important is publication for the application process? How much would it weigh? Perhaps I can ask Jalini and Aisha just to mute yourselves whilst Shailesh addresses that one.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So remember, publication is only one part of the application form, and it will be weighed equally amongst things like posters and teaching and all that other stuff. And we're fully aware, you know, we're assessing you at this stage of a IMT3 or mid IMT3 level doctors. So not many people will have a, you know, publication, and certainly nearly no one will have a high impact publication unless you've kind of done a PhD before you applied for specialty training. So it's only one part. So my a top tip would be look for low hanging fruit. You know, one other part on the applications is, have you done a teach the teacher course? Well, you know, that's a bit easier to tick than having a publication. But if you have got a publication, brilliant, you know, you'll get the points for that. And I would definitely not discourage you from looking towards doing that, because that will definitely be something that you can talk about at your interview. But in terms of the application itself, you know, it's weighed equally amongst everything else. So look for the low hanging fruit.
And the next one's for you as well, I'm afraid. How can I show my commitment to specialty when applying? I'm an IMT2 with no endocrinology placement. That's trickier.
Yep, so that was me. I didn't have any diabetes endocrine rotations during my foundation or core training, but it's showing initiative actually. So going and meeting the training program director, having clinic weeks or using taster days to go and sit in some diabetes endocrine clinics, and then keeping those links that you forge when you do go to those clinic days or whatever. So look for a little project to get involved with that will help build your application. You know, finding an interesting case, submit an abstract to DUK or Society for Endocrinology and your meeting. You can do lots of different things despite not having a rotation in the specialty. It just takes a little bit of time and intuition.
Great. I don't know if Aisha or Jalini are still on the chat. I know they might have had to pop out briefly. You're there. So the next question is, which region is best to train in diabetes and endocrinology in the UK? I suspect we all have slightly different answers to that question. So I'm going to reframe it, if I may, as to how would you go about choosing a region to train in? And I might get Aisha to answer that if that's okay.
So again, it depends so much on your personal preference and choice. I'm London, so I would say London is the best, but that might be extremely controversial and obviously quite unfair to people who are training in Cambridge, Leicester, or Leeds, or Liverpool, or Manchester, because they're all areas of excellence. So we are so lucky that almost every training rotation is affiliated to an excellent teaching hospital with great mentors and great training opportunities. So I think wherever you are, you should be able to find a place. And the good thing with the new training system is, like, you will spend at least 50% of your time in a teaching hospital, and that is what matters, because you gain different type of experience from a district journal and different type of experience from a teaching hospital. So it's good to get a mix of both. And those of us who are young parents or young carers, it's not easy for us to move with children with us. So I would say stick to where you are, apply for the job you want to get. And I chose to train in South London while living in Kent because I had done my CMT in Kent and I wanted some more variety. I wanted to see a different mix of patients and I wanted to see a different type of mentoring skill. So it's all very personal and it's also fluid, but D&E is it's not like a procedure-based specialty where you need to go to Brompton and Harefield to see a specialist heart transplant team only. So you can get the same experience from a lot of different regions. So another plus for D&E.
So Jalini, I might address this one to you as an educational supervisor. So this is from a foundation trainee, and it's great to see we have some foundation trainees in the audience. I'm applying for IMT next month. I've organised some endocrine clinics to attend. what should I be looking to document or acquire from these opportunities with higher specialty training in mind? Great question.
Yeah, I think at your level, it's not that you have to be in very specific high-end endocrinology. You know, you don't have to be seeing the neuroendocrine tumors or the complex endocrinology. This more simple bread and butter, thyroid illness, adrenal, Addison's, if you get something like that, those would be more useful. Or the tired patient, which is often what we get, this patient with sweating, you know, what sort of investigations would you do? That kind of general thing would stand you in better stead for the IMT level. Think about how you would investigate a tired patient. You know, that's often what we get in endocrinology. So I think I mean, it's hard at your stage to get to clinics, so it's great that you're making the effort and carving some time out to do that, because that will in itself will stand good stead. It isn't always in the foundation doctor's program to get to clinics. So even if it's in your own time, you're carving out that time to go, and everything that you pick up will be useful for the interviews.
Can I add to that a little bit? So,
yeah,
so you've got something already to add to. So one thing is, one thing that will be asked is what's your commitment to the specialties? So if you're already organising your own clinics, doing your foundation training, you've got something to talk about at your interview. And during the interview, there's in both stations there's a clinical case. Now I'm a very osmotic learner, and I try to think about cases that I've seen when I'm answering questions, and the cases that will come up in the interview won't be really rare, complicated things. There will be common things. So if you're going to clinic and you're seeing patients, it will help you kind of logically work through those cases that will be presented at the interview. I saw that patient with X disorder. This is how they were managed. So that will help you during interviews. So you're doing all the right stuff. So well done.
Can I just add on very quickly to that? You can get your supervisor to sign off a taster week for you as well. So you can say I did a taster week in diabetes and endocrine. So that's good documentation. I sign it all the time for foundation training. So that's a good piece of evidence for you to upload when you're filling in your application. Thank
you. So for those of us still early in our career, where do we start? Should we be interested in research or producing a publication? So how do we get into research? Shailesh, maybe you'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, so it's very much dependent on where you're working at the moment and what is happening at the trust or the hospital or the region that you're in. So a little bit of interest, actually supervisors, consultants love that. You know, if they've got a project and someone is interested, we've always got stuff going on. So just go and talk to consultants in the hospital that you're in or the region that you're in and ask what's happening, because you may not necessarily know about everything that's happening in the department at the time. And you don't have to have research, you don't have to have a publication. You know, some people hate research. Actually, what they do enjoy is teaching. So if you've got an interest in something else, pursue that interest. Don't just do something in research because actually it's something that you think you should have. Do what you enjoy, and that will be appreciated, you know, wherever you are in your career.
Yeah, fully support that. That's really important. Right, so one for Aisha. How do you see diabetes and endocrinology in the next 10 to 15 years?
It's ever so evolving. Like diabetes, you will have a special session tomorrow, the diabetes technology, the new pathways for type 2 diabetes for young adults, they are the future. And in endocrinology, there's so much research on genetics, there's so much research on cellular level, biochemistry, and how can we change molecular level environment and change the tumor prognosis of a patient. So there's so much going on. It's so happening. Endocrine is not where it was 20 years ago, and diabetes has certainly rapidly evolved within the last 2 years. So this is a specialty which is going to stay. You will always have work for sure. And as you've seen in all the talks, there's so much variety.
I've just come back from a year of maternity leave, and even in that period of time, things have changed quite substantially. So it's a really exciting time to be an endocrinologist, isn't it? So there's a question here about private practice. I don't know if any of you feel able to comment on that. Fine, we'll skip over that. So maybe
I can talk a little bit about it. So one of my colleagues does do
yeah.
private practice.
Okay.
So I certainly don't do private practice. I'm tired enough at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But there is lots of colleagues around the country who do private practice, and there is scope to do it. I'm not sure so much in diabetes, but definitely endocrinology, there is an appetite to it. So if that's something you're interested in the future, yeah, there's opportunities available.
And probably, again, becoming more numerous as time goes on. Jalini, which courses would you recommend, if any? Is anything that comes to mind for an aspiring endocrinologist?
I think I didn't do too many at the stage that they're at, but I do find, just linking to one of the previous questions, I often have cases in my mind that I'm ready to do a case report on, whether it's the ABCD conference or Society of Endocrinology bits. So if one of the trainees came and said to me, "Oh, have you got any ideas?" I've always got ideas, and so do a lot of my colleagues. And then if they go to that conference, they've got time to present their poster at the meeting, but also to attend the conference. Often it's very reduced rates. One of the trainees just went to the ABCD for about £50 or something because they had a poster. So although there's not specific things, I mean, there will be, when you're in training, there'll be the diabetes update, which is really highly recommended, and the endocrine update conference, which is highly recommended. But they're more for the more senior, already in the speciality trainees. When you're in the IMT level, I think anything, is good exposure. Some of it will go over your head because it's very science-based, but as you go along in the speciality, you'll understand it more.
Yeah, and it's that point about osmosis again, I suppose, isn't it? So simply by going to these meetings, you'll learn a lot and get a feel for it. So, okay.
There's two things I would suggest. So one is teach the teacher. I've already said that before. And the other thing is, so I'm not sure whether the Society for Endocrinology do this anymore, but before they used to offer grants to undifferentiated trainees. So these are pre-SPR, so CMT foundation level doctors who haven't quite decided what they wanted to do, and they used to offer grants to go to the Society for Endocrinology annual meeting. So if they're still offering that, then that's something good. Again, you need to be nominated by a consultant in diabetes and endocrinology, but that's something that you could you could do.
And just to add, you can sign up to the YDEF newsletter as well. We do a lot of stuff for the undifferentiated IMT trainees. You can present at our YDEF day. And then once you sign up to the newsletter, they keep sending you emails about what courses are coming up, and you can attend one at least, maybe before you train.
And Shailesh, this is a very practical question, again, about applications. Things done prior to IMT, audit, teaching, and so on, they still count, don't they, towards HST applications?
Yeah, so they all count. Obviously, if you've done stuff more recently, when we're reading applications, that comes, oh, okay, you've done that, in the last year or two. If you did something about 10 years ago and you're still putting that on your application, you do think, have you not done something a bit more recently that you could have put on the application? And if you can, try and make these things D&E specific on the application. But again, as I said earlier, if you don't have any example that's D&E specific, we recognise that you've gone through a training program potentially in your IMT3 level. You can't have done D&E everything, so it will all count.
Brilliant. So here's an interesting one. I'm not going to direct it to any of you in particular. What do you find most difficult about diabetes and endocrinology as a specialty? I don't want to pick on one of you.
I'm thinking hard. But I think you've picked the wrong people. We are very enthusiastic. So maybe find someone who's not here on the platform.
I think coming from a DGH point of view, probably with the current climate, the way things are, and strikes and that sort of thing, which hopefully won't last forever, I think trying to sort of manage ward work is probably the most difficult thing for me at the moment. Not really the speciality work. That's always sort of similar to how it has been. But because of strikes, there's a knock-on effect with I haven't been able to see the patients because their clinics have been cancelled, and then I'm having a lot of telephone calls and emails from people saying my appointment's been cancelled 3 or 4 times now, you know, can you help? And then I'm overbooking people. So it's more of these kind of practical things, which is sad. It's outside the specialty influence. And I don't think it's just in diabetes and endocrinology, though. I think it's affecting all of us.
Do you think maybe because it's a relatively clinic-heavy specialty that influences how much we're affected, perhaps?
I think there is something in that, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, when would you recommend taking the SCI? So the SCI is the Specialty Certificate in Diabetes and Endocrinology that all registrars have to do. Is this an exam you would recommend only doing after you've started ST4 and had a few years of training? Aisha, you're nodding there. Do you want to address that?
Yes, absolutely. I wouldn't try and do it in IMT or earlier. I think you need to have some clinical experience to make the best use of the exam as well, because you will be reading, you want to make it more, you want to get something out of the exam. You just not a tick box exercise. You need to be able to practice what you're preaching. So I would recommend do it ST4, 5 plus level at least.
Great. So the next question is about gender affirming treatment in diabetes and endocrinology in the future. So is this a specific subspecialty? Is it part of D&E training? Will it be a bigger part in the future? Anyone feel able to address that?
In our area, we don't have anyone with a particular interest. So we often refer to Charing Cross, where Leighton Seal is based. I think it's going to be quite small pockets where you get very specialised specialists, if you like. They're not going to be based at every trust, I would imagine.
So in the East Midlands, our local gender clinic is in Nottingham. So we refer patients up to Nottingham, and if trainees want experience in going to the clinic, then we're more than happy, you know, speak to the person doing your rota, your training program director. If that's something that you want some experience in, then we're more than happy to arrange for, you know, to go to Nottingham to sit in clinics and gain some experience in something that you're interested in.
Great. There's a question about interviews, specifically clinical cases. Are there any specific resources you would recommend, or would you advise attending interview courses? I think there are many of those on offer now. Shailesh?
Yeah, so I've got my own personal view on courses, which I'm not sure if I should share or not. I didn't go on any interview courses, and I wouldn't say any interview course is better than the other. I think in terms of preparing for interview questions, as we said earlier, going to clinics and getting some clinical experience, I think is the most useful. Well, for me anyway, because I try and apply things or, you know, questions to things that I've seen before and try and work logically through cases like that. But I think it's, as I said, they're not going to be asking really rare things in the interviews. They're going to be asking about common clinical cases that you will be encountering on a day-to-day basis with common clinical scenarios and problems that you have to work through that you encounter with these patients. So it won't be just a simple case as well. You know, there will be something extra to think about the case. I probably can't tell you cases that have come up before in case they reuse cases in the future, but it will be something common and a problem associated with that common problem that you should be able to show that you can logically work through. And you're not expected to know all the answers. You know, if you don't know the answers, then have a think, well, if I don't know the answer, what might I be able to do to try and find out the answer to, you know, the solution that I don't know?
Lovely, thanks very much. And then the final question is a long one, but I think is again relating to, you know, how one goes about getting into specific research areas that people might be interested in. In this particular case, it looks like adrenal and thyroid. And then actually one for Aisha about the, I don't know if can you guys see the questions?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, fine. Aisha, do you want to lead with the thing about chief registrar, the chief registrar role?
So the chief registrar role is definitely not mandatory, and it's not the only leadership and management role around. You have FLM trainees, you have clinical lead. There's a lot of leadership and training management roles going around. So it's worth looking at NHS jobs. They're advertised usually February, March, April, so that you can apply for them in advance before your ARCPs in July, traditionally June, July. Chief Registrar role is definitely not mandatory. It helped me a lot. So I did not have to do a leadership and training course before my ARCP final CCT to say I need to go on a 10-day leadership and training course, because the training I had as RCP Chief Registrar was adequate and enough to count towards leadership experience. I will let Salish and Jalini answer the research question part of this question.
Yeah, so it's tricky. I don't know too much about outside the area that I worked in and at. So at Imperial, for example, there's a huge obesity interest with research. So that's really where the majority of the trainees just almost automatically end up going. So I think you're particularly interested in adrenal and thyroid. I think what I would do is approach my local, very interested adrenal and thyroid consultant. So, for example, at Imperial, it would have been Graham Williamson, I think, and there'll be someone at UCL. You mentioned you're at UCL doing a med ed. So try and approach them and ask them, where are the leaders in thyroid and adrenal research? And then they will either put you in contact or give you the contact details, and you can, start making inroads. And it often is a case of emailing out saying, here I am, this is where I am in my training, I'm really keen, have you got any money? These doctors have been sort of applying for grants and they're looking for someone, but you two haven't come together yet. So you try and find those specialities where you're interested, and perhaps everything will come together and they also have a pot of money for a bit of research as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there are the academic clinical fellowships dotted around the country as well, some of which I think are still operating at kind of higher specialty training level, aren't they? Well, fantastic. I think we've worked our way through all of the questions. Thanks to the audience for posting those. And it just leaves me now to close the session. Thank you so much for our three speakers, Shailesh, Jalini, Aisha. You've been fantastic. Thanks for the talks. Thanks for engaging with the questions. To everyone in the audience, you will receive an email. In that email will be a request for some feedback. Please fill in the survey, because then we can send you an attendance certificate, which you can put in your portfolios. That will help in your application. The session, you will notice, has been recorded, so there'll be a link in the email as well that will allow you to watch back. That recording will be on the Society page or the Society channel on YouTube, and also in the members area. So if any of you are not members but are interested in joining the Society for Endocrinology, I would really encourage you to do that. As I mentioned, there is another taster webinar tomorrow, 5 o'clock, focusing on diabetes. So if you haven't clocked that, please do register and join us then. And we will essentially continue this discussion. Thank you again to our speakers. Thanks very much, Heather, and the team at Society for Endocrinology for organising. And thanks to you all for your attention. Have a lovely evening.